notoriously forget to hit record, so we were quite paranoid about it. Welcome everybody to our Agents of Change Reflections and Resources webinar. I'm delighted that you're all able to make it and really appreciate you taking time in the middle or the beginning of your day to join us. My name is Eva Jackson and I'm Managing Director with ICLEI Canada. I'm joined by my colleague Adlar and our Agents of Change participants, which we'll introduce in a little bit. If we can go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to, of course, begin today's session by acknowledging the land that I sit upon on this incredibly beautiful spring day here in Toronto, which is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I'm thankful and grateful and indebted for their stewardship over the land and allowing us to live, work, and play here. If you'd like to take a moment, put into the chat the land upon which you're located. We welcome finding out where we're all joining in from today. Before we get into the details of today's webinar, I wanted to share just a few thoughts. Sorry, Adlar, I gave you a wrong prompt there. Share a few thoughts about ICLEI Canada, and I'll wait for that slide deck to come on. ICLEI is a local government association of municipalities that have made a commitment to sustainability, and with our work here in ICLEI Canada to climate change mitigation and adaptation. We work through a variety of mechanisms. Adler, next slide, please. And we sum that up in a few ways, that we connect leaders through events such as this one, virtual and in person. We accelerate action through programs and project delivery, and we provide a gateway to solutions through the provision of resources and tools. And I think today's webinar really speaks to all three of those mechanisms, let's say, and that the Agents of Change project was one of those projects through which we accelerated action, in this case around the establishment and creation of volunteer engagement programs. And today, since we're launching the new resources created out of that project, we're also providing a gateway to solutions to replicate and create additional volunteer programs beyond in those communities that were participating in this unique program. So we have a small Mentimeter question now. And so for those of you on a laptop or computer, feel free to open a different web browsers, or if you have your phone or other piece of technology handy, we'll put into, you just go to menti.com and use the code that's at the top of your screen. We'll put that into the chat. And answer the following question, if you don't mind, which is, are you considering a climate volunteer program, or do you have an existing volunteer program in your community? We're really curious to see whether folks are already thinking about this, it's kind of far down on the list, or if it's already happening. So I'll give it just a little bit of time. And then, regardless of where you fall on these answers, though, I think we have something in it for everybody today, from descriptions of the three of the programs that were created through Agents of Change to the provision of the resources that were created throughout the program that we're launching today. So a good mix of existing programs, new ones, folks who aren't thinking about it. Maybe after today, we'll think about it a little bit more. Okay, as those continue to trickle in, we will have a couple of other Mentimeter questions at the end of today's webinar. So maybe just keep that browser open until the next question pops up. So Adler, maybe we'll pop right back into that slide deck. And we'll get into a few words about the Agents of Change project specifically. So I'll get you to jump up 2 slides for me, Adler. So the Agents of Change project was a cohort-style project that worked with 10 municipalities that were selected through an open call that we held in early 2022. So just under a year and a half ago. We created the program to help those municipalities who were looking to better engage the community around climate action. And in this case, specifically, lowering emissions, energy transition, helping to achieve a net zero target through the creation of a volunteer program or the revitalization of an existing volunteer program that maybe was started before the pandemic that needed a little bit of a boost to get going. So we had that open call. We selected the 10 municipalities, and through that, we brought them together to discuss all sorts of issues related to the creation of that program, meaning the focus area of the program. Is it going to focus on transportation, home energy retrofit, businesses, youth and young people? So that was more around target audience, helping to establish a governance structure for the program. How is it going to run? Thinking about training and how the municipal staff involved in the project could take on training of their volunteers, communications, and then the program delivery. So actually launching the program and getting into that implementation phase. One of the pieces that we really wanted to think through and ensure was how are we going to get participants to maintain these programs after our Agents of Change project finished. It's one thing to design something within the discrete confines of the work we have, the time we had together and the funding we had, but it's another to establish some sustainability for these programs to run into the long term. So we brought together the AOC participants, and in just a second, we'll show you where they were, along with a leadership group of other municipalities to help design and guide the process and review some of the outputs that we had created. And then a variety of guest organizations who had experience in delivering these style of programs. So examples of those were the City of Toronto Neighborhood Climate Action Champions program staff, Monumental, which focuses on building fairer and just cities through expressly thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in public engagement, policy development, and Youth Climate Lab to help us identify ways to mobilize youth to create more climate resilient futures. And those are really valuable, is that they gave a lot of ideas that could be replicated and lessons learned and real tips that could be applied. The next slide just shows where our participants were located. So as I said, we had 10. We're lucky enough to have many of them on the call today, and we'll hear presentations from 3 of them, just reflecting on their experiences and the lessons they learned, perhaps some of the barriers or challenges they faced and how they overcame them. On the next slide, I would be remiss to not mention that the project was undertaken with the financial support of the Government of Canada through the Climate Action and Awareness Fund, delivered through Environment and Climate Change Canada. And with that, I think I will pass it over, next slide, to our 3 presenters. So they'll be presenting from west to east. And first we have Nanaimo, presentations from Nanaimo, and that is both the City of Nanaimo and the District of Nanaimo, represented by Dave Stewart, Environmental Planner with the City of Nanaimo, and Taylor Nielsen, Climate Action Outreach Coordinator with the District of Nanaimo. Following them, we'll have a presentation from Dufferin County. We are lucky to have Kylie-Anne Grube, Climate Engagement Specialist with the county here with us to present. And last, we'll head out east and have the town of New Glasgow, and Emily McIntosh, Climate Action Coordinator for the town, will here to be presenting for them. So with that, Taylor, I'll ask you to share your screen, I think, and we'll get started with our participant reflections.
Okay, I think I just, oh, there we go. I think I just shared properly. Let me know if it's all good. Good, okay, I get the thumbs up. All right, let me move this so I can see my speaker notes. All right, hi everyone, thank you for joining today. My name is Taylor Nielsen. I'm the Climate Action Outreach Coordinator at the Regional District of Nanaimo. I'm presenting today with my colleague Dave Stewart, who's an environmental planner with the City of Nanaimo. And we're going to talk about the program we created through the Agents of Change project called Acting for Climate Together. And before I start, I just want to say that I'm presenting today from Coast Salish traditional territory. I just need to switch. There we go. So a quick overview of our program, Acting for Climate Together. It's a community-based initiative where teams can take action to reduce their carbon footprint and become drivers of change in our community. This was a joint project created by the City of Nanaimo and the Regional District of Nanaimo. And the focus of the program is to inspire group action in our region. So to make it easy for participants, we developed a toolkit that includes a list of actions for teams or groups that help them lower their greenhouse gas emissions, improve health and well-being in the community, and can contribute to long-term savings. So after participants join, what will they do? They will, teams that sign up, they will use a toolkit to complete actions in 6 different categories and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Complete actions in 6 different categories that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect the natural environment, and also relate back to our other services such as solid waste and watershed protection. So the toolkit that we created, it includes off-the-shelf action ideas or projects that residents can complete in categories including transportation, food and waste, buildings and energy, nature, and climate knowledge. But then groups can also have, they also have the option of creating their own unique projects that are outside of the box of what's included in the toolkit under the big action category. And then within each category, actions are assigned points, and groups have to get a minimum of 5 points per category to be eligible for an action badge or a prize. And some of the projects that residents can do include creating or starting a food sharing program, hosting a repair workshop, doing a building energy audit, sharing knowledge on active transportation in the region. There's lots of different levels of participation and ways to participate in this program. So some of the key events that we've held already, on January 13th, we opened up our application on our website. We have a full application that resident groups can fill out to apply. Haven't turned anybody away yet. We've accepted every group that has applied. And then on February 17th, we kind of had a soft deadline where everybody who applied before the 17th was allowed to attend our kickoff event. And we're still accepting applications on a rolling basis, though, to try and encourage participation in our more rural communities. And then on February 25th, we held a kickoff event where we had 2 speakers, one from UBC and then one from a local nonprofit here called the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. And we just brought in those speakers to kind of encourage and inspire our groups to take action and show them what projects have already been done in the community, show them what's possible. And then from March to June, we're holding monthly check-in meetings to see where everybody's at. And our first meeting went really great. We heard about some of the actions that groups have done already. Like one of our groups held a vegetarian birthday party, and some of our other groups are holding some amazing Earth Day events. So there's lots of things being done already, and lots of ideas that are going to come to fruition pretty soon. And then in the summer, we're going to hold a summer celebration event to celebrate where everybody's at so far and hand out some of our prizes. And then in the late fall, we are going to open it up for a new cohort to join, give out more prizes to celebrate the actions that have been done throughout the summer, and possibly hold another celebration event. And I'm going to pass it off to Dave now.
Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, so again, my name is Dave Stewart. I'm the environmental planner at the City of Nanaimo on Nanaimo territory. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the materials Taylor spoke a little bit about already that we created for the project. So first of all the funding for these materials was provided by ICLEI through the Government of Canada, so we did want to acknowledge and thank that. So we used that funding to hire a graphic designer, and the first kind of task we had, actually, pardon me, going back a little bit further, the first task we really set aside once we kind of had an idea of what this program was going to look like was creating the name. So after a lot of back and forth and tossing around ideas, we settled on the Acting for Climate Together name. We liked the ACT acronym and the branding, and we felt that the name really spoke to the group nature of the program, and we're really looking at people working together to act for climate change. So we then hired the graphic designer to create the logo that you see throughout the slides, and create some project template materials. We also ended up hiring a copy editor to review all the materials and project website. That's not only to fix all of my typos and everything else, but to also really help us create language that was accessible to the public, no matter where they were at in terms of their literacy levels. Obviously, somewhat literate to read our materials, but we tried to tone down the jargon. So in terms of those materials, we created a brochure, which you see on the bottom right. That's the outside part of the brochure. The inside really is focusing on those categories and action badges that Taylor spoke about. And we created a toolkit, which again, Taylor spoke briefly about, but that was really created to create a more detailed overview of what the actions are, how to achieve them, and really how to get your team involved. So it's kind of a how-to guide for the participants, as well as a PowerPoint template that you're seeing right now. All those materials and more are hosted on our Get Involved website, which is the website platform we use for the program. We include our events on there, videos, as well as a lot of resource sharing that we've done through the groups. So it's a public website that's both, we're using it both for the groups and for the public to learn about the project as well. So next slide, please, Taylor. So ICLEI asked us to answer a couple of questions, which we'll try to do here maybe a little bit more. I think one of the questions they asked us was to share one key learning. As you can see, we're not very good listeners. We have four key learnings here that we're going to share with you. So Taylor and I couldn't pick just one. So in terms of some of the learnings that we had through developing this program is one, probably not a surprise to anyone who's done this. Volunteer retention is difficult. The program should be easy to access, inclusive, and allow for different levels of effort and participation, which is actually one real benefit we found with the ACT program, is because it has the different actions and badge categories. We have participants that probably, to be totally honest, are probably only interested in one or two actions in one category, but they're going to do that and they're going to do it well. Where we have other keeners that are probably going to do everything. And so it's a program that's inclusive of both those levels, and you can kind of choose to participate as you will, especially being a group project. If you only want to be part of one, but someone else in your group wants to do something else, that's still possible. The other key learning was kind of, we want to really learn to connect with potential partners and stakeholders early. We learned that quite honestly fairly late in the game when we started hearing what motivates them. We already had the project kind of up and running. So we did have some conversations, but when we actually got up and running, we learned that maybe not surprisingly, funding was a key motivator, but we just simply didn't have time at that point to get that council and board permission that we needed to provide funding. Be flexible and transparent, kind of on that. So we definitely pivoted a number of times in developing this program. I think Taylor mentioned we had a speaker from the Nanaimo Climate Action Hub. We were originally going to partner with them, but realized due to how local governments work in terms of our approval process and everything related to that, it wasn't going to work. They went out and, to plug their program, created an individual-based climate action program called the Nanaimo Climate Pledge, where we went on this group-based program that you heard Taylor already present on. That being said, partnership and networks have been really effective. We use them. We use a number of neighborhood associations and other groups to get the word out and really help gauge some interest in the program. So that's been huge. That being said, again, one key question that we are still dealing with is, Taylor mentioned the regional district. For those that aren't familiar with regional districts in the BC context, it's basically like a county. So they have quite a number of rural areas where I'm representing the city of about 100,000, which is a little bit more urban. So we have a lot of established groups in the city, not as many in the rural areas. So we are still working on how to get those groups motivated. So thank you. Yeah. So in terms of the other question ICLEI wanted us to answer was what was our key accomplishment? And again, we shared more than one here, so I'm just gonna run off a few stats that you can already see on the slide. But we had 16 teams signed up to date. 14 of those were from the city, totaling 373 members total. Our kickoff event, for those that aren't familiar with the west coast of BC, it does snow here sometimes. When it does snow, it's a big deal. And that's exactly what happened on our kickoff event in February. So we only had 20 attend. That being said, 20 people to get out in a snowstorm in British Columbia, I consider a success. So we had 20 attend that kickoff event, which Taylor mentioned had a couple keynote speakers, and then we used the rest of that day to workshop some of their early tasks. One of the main things we really got out of that, and probably the key accomplishment that we're most proud of, is it kind of happened organically. I'd love to take credit for it, but we probably can't, is there's just been real quick. A lot of engagement and connection between the groups. Really fantastic conversations that just sort of happened organically between those groups. We have had some actions already completed, and with Earth Day coming up, we know 3 of the groups are all planning Earth Day events. So we're excited to see those go. Next slide. So the other question that ICLEI wanted to know is just in terms of, and Eva kind of spoke to this, is what are the how we are going to continue on and keep the groups engaged. So what we have found, those monthly check-in meetings, we've only had 1 to date, but it was quite effective in terms of really getting the interest from the groups and sharing those resources and successes. So celebrating those successes is another key event. We're going to have a big event in June as part of a larger sustainability event. We'll celebrate their successes publicly. Sharing resources, providing those staff permissions and connections to help, for example, get permission to work on city land, direct them towards funding opportunities, whether it's municipal funding opportunities or elsewhere. And then using those participants to evaluate and improve the program based on feedback. We mentioned hearing about funding being a key motivator, so we're working on trying to connect them more to funding opportunities and add funding right into the program. So that's as we launch again in the fall. So that's it for that slide. And my presentation. So yeah, Taylor and I's contact information is at the bottom there. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And again, we just really want to acknowledge the funding provided by ICLEI and the government of Canada to make this program possible. So I think we're holding questions for the end, but I'll throw it back to Eva.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Taylor. There are 2 questions that are quite specific to you both. So if you don't mind, I'll just give those. One you both touched on, but did the regional district and the city include other partners to help with development of the project and/or information dissemination? Were Indigenous nations included?
Taylor, you want to start, or do you want me to take that one?
I can take it. Sorry, you could take it. You take it, please.
Okay, I'll start and you can correct me. So the first part of the question, the answer is yes. We originally planned, actually, when we put in our proposal with ICLEI to support this program, we originally planned to kind of tag team on a program under development by a local nonprofit group called the Nanaimo Climate Action Club. Their program is up and running. So I saw at least there's 1 participant from my region here, so I'll promote it. It's called the Nanaimo Climate Action Pledge. When we went to work with them, there were, because we're local governments, we obviously have to go through a number of approvals for anything we do, and we need to, in terms of our communications. So we realized they needed to be a bit more nimble in terms of their approach. So we realized that there's room for 2 programs. We focus more on a group type focus, and they're more individual. So we have continually been in connection with them. One of the guest speakers, again, was from that program at our kickoff event, but we decided to go our separate ways in terms of that. In terms of other groups, we've had a lot of conversations with our neighborhood network in Nanaimo, which is our neighborhood associations. We've reached out to a number of climate groups. I know Taylor could probably speak to how she's gone out to a lot of the rural groups and had some conversations on that. And in terms of a couple local residents, both at the Nanaimo Climate Action Club, and we tried to get early feedback. Again, one of our key learnings is we probably should have done more of that, because we did hear some stuff as we launched the program in terms of what we could do. And in terms of the Indigenous focus, that's something we could have done and should still do more of. We haven't really had a lot of that in this program in particular. I don't know, is there anything you want to add, Taylor?
One thing I did forget to mention at the kickoff event, we did have a elder from the Nanaimo First Nation come to do a introductory welcome and dance. So they're aware of the project on that level, but unfortunately the nations are so overwhelmed with requests in this area that we've put the information out there, but we haven't had the opportunity to include them in this project because they're so overwhelmed with requests right now. But we did have them come for the welcome, the elder come for the welcome, and that was amazing. And we all got to play instruments that she brought, and so included in that factor.
The elder took some of the materials and said she was going to bring it back to the nation. So that was really encouraging to see that enthusiasm. It wasn't just her showing up and doing her thing. There was definitely a connection there made in terms of the project itself.
Fantastic. One more question. Aside from funding, were there any other motivating factors identified by potential partners, stakeholders?
Honestly, just the relationship building has been a huge benefit for these groups. So a lot of we even have some people that have signed up to the groups as individuals. So motivating factor is just having somebody willing, a champion. But that leads back to the capacity issue of having little capacity. There's volunteer retention problems, volunteer capacity issues. But we are finding that there's lots of people that are motivated to act, but we need to find those champions that are willing to actually plan things for people to attend. So, but no, funding was a huge motivator that we found. So
I think the only other thing, like Taylor talked about the connections with each other, also the connections with the city and the municipality, and knowing who to talk to and get those land use permissions was huge. I think will continue to be huge as people are planning their projects. A lot of the projects wanted to do, like, for example, I just talked to someone today about greening a city walkway, and that's not something you can just go and plant unless you're going to go kind of Margaret Garella style, but I can't tell you to go and plant anyways, but we can work and help them get permission to do that, so that's ongoing.
So navigating those processes and consent efforts. Thank you so much, Taylor. Dave, we'll have time for more questions of participants. If you think of other questions specifically for Dave and Taylor, then feel free to use the chat. Otherwise, we'll continue on. Kylie-Anne, I think you should be all set up to screen share as we head eastward.
Great. Let me get this up here. All right.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Excited to share with you some of our reflections here in Dufferin County about the process of creating our volunteer program, which we've called the Youth Climate Activation Circle. So our Youth Climate Activation Circle, it's a volunteer program designed to empower our local youth to advance climate solutions related to sustainable transportation, residential energy, and agriculture, which are our top three emitting sectors in the county and where we want to put most of our effort and our priority focus. And the idea for this volunteer group came from what we heard in the community, some gaps and some needs that we thought that we would have a role in filling. So speaking with parents and teachers, they expressed that eco-anxiety was a pretty big concern for a lot of the youth. And at the same time, we were chatting with some high school students who were really phenomenal leaders in doing climate projects on their own in the community. But one of the challenges they were facing was continuity. So as they graduated, some of them moved away from the county. It was difficult to keep things running, and they expressed this desire for some sort of central administrative body to really help this program have longevity. And so that's kind of where our idea to focus in on youth for this program came. We also committed to the creation of a volunteer program in our community climate action plan that was adopted by our council in 2021, which was our first ever climate action plan in Dufferin. And so we were so grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the Agents of Change project to bring this idea we had to life. And yes, we're very grateful for all of that support. So the program itself is comprised of an annual cohort of 8 volunteers between the ages of 16 and 25. And 8 is kind of our starting point. We thought that was a reasonable and manageable number for our first year, but there could be opportunities to expand that number as we go on. And each year, our volunteers are going to design and implement a climate action project, again, related to either sustainable transportation, residential energy, or agriculture. Throughout the course of the year, we ask our volunteers for a 40-hour commitment. And in return, we have a number of offerings for them because the ultimate goal of this program is for it to be accessible and beneficial to them. So some of the offerings, it includes a $500 honorarium, reimbursement of transportation and childcare costs, as well as upgrades to rural Wi-Fi. I say where possible because that can be a pretty tricky thing, but we've tried to do our best. And then throughout the program as well, we've promised our volunteers exposure to green career pathways and connections to local experts. At the completion of the program, our youth climate ambassadors will receive a certificate. And we've also expressed to them that at any point that they're more than welcome to come to us and ask for a letter of support or a reference, either while they're in the program or afterwards as well. So throughout the year, their participation in the program is divided into 3 different phases. We've just completed the first phase with them, which is training. So we've started off with a really climate change 101 foundationals for them, because our expectation is that they don't need to come into this program with any sort of prior experience or knowledge. We can provide all of that to them at the start. Some highlights from our training phase included an eco-anxiety workshop and a climate storytelling workshop to kind of move beyond the technical and scientific dimensions of the climate crisis that we usually focus on. We wanted to give them different perspectives. We also hosted a climate solutions fair. So we invited different community representatives who were doing climate action work in their own organizations to come. And our volunteers went around the room and asked them questions about their projects and had an opportunity to meet them. And we kind of called it speed dating, but for climate solutions was essentially the premise of the solutions fair, which was really fun. And then recently we did have our community Indigenous elder and her daughter come in to do a presentation for us on Indigenous perspectives on the climate crisis, as well as how we can integrate traditional knowledge and Western science together for solutions. Then the last phase of our program is knowledge sharing. So this is really about sharing their success with the wider community. And that will look like a presentation to council, some presentations to local schools or eco clubs, and potentially a toolkit as well, so that other youth or future cohorts can use that as a tool to create a similar event. So I'll finish off here with some of our reflections on the process of creating our program. So one key learning that we had is really to build flexibility. An example of that is we required a 40-hour commitment from our volunteers, but we also asked them, when would you like to meet? Would you like to meet in person? Do you want to do this virtually? How many times a month should we meet? On what days? All of those aspects were left up to them to decide to build that flexibility in. And we found that made the program a little bit more accessible and it worked for everyone's schedules. Ideally this year, everything lined up for folks, but it might not be so easy in future years, but we can help. One question that we're still grappling with is kind of connected to this idea of flexibility, and it's how we can continue to create an equitable and accessible program for all of our volunteers. This is something we really considered right from the outset of the project. So we had an advisory team that supported the development of the program and helped us with our recruitment and selection process as well. We did our best to build in equity considerations into the program right from the start, but we found that we've still come up with a few issues in terms of our volunteers being able to come to meetings or participate fully in things like online meetings when they have rural Wi-Fi that's not always the best. So we've worked with our advisory team to kind of come up with solutions to that, but we've also accepted that as part of the program, I think this is going to be an ongoing question that we're grappling with. Each year, we're going to have new cohorts, new volunteers, and we have to be flexible and able to adapt to the challenges as they come up and how we can support them in being able to participate really meaningfully in the program. Next is one accomplishment we achieved over the course of the project. For us, this was just a moment of reflecting back and being really proud of the progress our volunteers have made so far. So as we moved out of the training into the project design piece of the program, we found our volunteers were really finding their voice and taking ownership of the project, which was really nice to see. At the beginning, they tended to be very quiet, happy to listen to us, but we found that after the training, they felt more confident, I think, in their knowledge, and they were sharing their ideas, they were asking thought-provoking questions, and really just working independently and taking ownership of their project. And so we were really proud of that moment to see we're about halfway through the program at this point. So to see how far they've progressed already is really exciting for us. And finally is how we will continue to make progress with our volunteers. So I mentioned at the beginning that this is an annual project. But for us, we have invited our volunteers to come back for up to 3 years, or until they age out of the program, but most of them will be able to stay on, which is nice. And with that, as they come back each year, they can take on mentorship roles and leadership opportunities as they come up. So then that way they can kind of level up their skills each year that they're part of the program. Our other idea is to have an annual networking event. So as our volunteers complete the program and they're officially kind of out into the world, they can still come back and connect to previous cohorts, and also potentially come in and run workshops or talk about their career journeys to really keep that connection up between our volunteers over time. And I think that is the end of our reflections as part of the Agents of Change project. Again, thank you so much to ICLEI for all of your support, as well as the Government of Canada in helping us bring this program to life. And we're happy to share any more of our learnings or resources with folks if they're interested. And I can put my email in the chat.
Thanks, Kylie-Anne. That would be great. I'm sure people will be happy to reach out. One question for me, given that the county is so large, similarly and includes both rural and urban centers, similarly to Nanaimo, did you find that the volunteers wanted to meet virtually, or were they more likely to meet in person over the course of the training period?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had some of our volunteers more in the urban centers, some in the rural. And so what we ended up this year deciding to do is they wanted to do a mix of both. So right now we're meeting once a month in person for 2 hours and then once a month virtually online. And that way we're kind of thinking we can get the best of both worlds for folks.
Yeah, there's also a couple of questions in the chat, so hold on just a little longer. A question here, was there one project or multiple ones?
That's a good question. So there's one project. This year they decided to go with climate-friendly landscaping for energy efficiency. So their idea is to do a series of workshops throughout the summer for residents. So yes, there's, for the whole group, they collectively work on one project, and that project is going to change from year to year.
And then another question, is there any significance to the fact that the participants are overwhelmingly female?
So I think we were a little bit closer to a split in the actual applications. I think it kind of speaks to the research that's been done that, females traditionally are more oriented towards ecological projects or attitudes. I think there's been some research done on it. And I think we might want to look at that for next year and how we can kind of change the wording in our applications or the focus of the program, maybe to be a little bit more inviting to everyone. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. All right, Kylie-Anne, thanks for your presentation, and we'll have time for more questions, so hopefully you can stick around. And our last project that we're profiling is from the town of New Glasgow. So Emily, I think you should be good to share your screen and take us away.
Great, how does that look?
Looks perfect, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to present on New Glasgow's new volunteer program during today's webinar. I am the Town Climate Action Coordinator, and before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that the town of New Glasgow is located in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So the town of New Glasgow is a small riverside community located in northern Nova Scotia with a population of 9,471 residents. New Glasgow is committed to environmental leadership and a progressive future by providing opportunities where all residents and businesses are empowered to grow and flourish. And we are actively working towards net zero and climate resilience. Over the past 3 years, we have worked to build a strong foundation through the development of our Community Climate Action Plan, our Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory, our Community Greenhouse Gas Reduction targets of 25% below 2018 levels by 2025 and 50% below 2018 levels by 2030. And with these council-approved plans and targets, we are working to implement adaptation and mitigation actions and recognize that citizens and businesses, their participation is crucial for achieving our net zero and climate goals. And we also have outlined the development and implementation of a volunteer program within our community climate action plan. As I mentioned, our work is relatively new, so many of our residents remain unaware, and we have struggled in the past to effectively engage our community and intend to use this volunteer program to change this reality. So our new volunteer program is called the Net Zero New Glasgow Volunteer Program, and it brings together an annual cohort of community climate leaders. In our pilot year, we currently have a cohort of 10 volunteers. Town staff work with these volunteers, myself included, to collaboratively design and host events that would engage the broader community in climate action. Through this program, we're striving to provide meaningful volunteer experience to our core volunteers by designing high-impact events that are community-driven. As well, our program incorporates training and capacity building opportunities to allow volunteers with varying levels of climate change knowledge to participate, so people can really enter the program where they're at. No expertise required. Through our events, our main objectives are to reduce our community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, to promote green behavior change and individual action, and to build awareness of the town's climate and sustainability work. Our program events are grounded in and directed by some of the high-level actions outlined in our community climate action plan. And we're trying to take a focus on transportation and buildings, which collectively account for 2/3 of our community emissions. However, in addition to mitigation activities, we do have space in the program for adaptation actions and events, because we want to also increase our community's adaptive capacity and resilience. In developing our program, a key learning that has stood out from the beginning for us is the need for flexibility, and this clearly seems like a theme throughout many of the AOCO participants. We've heard it a few times today, and for us, this has come up along every step of the way, from our intended program launch, right around when post-tropical storm Fiona hit, to the recruitment phase, and now in our event planning stage. Originally, we had hoped to recruit and launch our program back in the fall. However, following the storm, we wanted to be sensitive to the immediate climate impact and decided to shift our launch date to the new year. And we found that by being flexible, we've been able to adapt to changing conditions. We've been able to meet people where they're at and harness their energy and momentum. A question that we're still grappling with is quantifying the greenhouse gas reduction potential of our full program, because some initiatives are slightly less straightforward than others to quantify. And with the hopes and aim to really have a high impact volunteer program, tracking these emission reductions for all of our events is a top priority and something that we are still working on and thinking about. So here are a few photos from 2 of our recent events, one back in the fall and one just a few weeks ago. So the first larger photo on the right is from an info session that we held just after the hurricane called Climate Change in Your Own Backyard, where we invited residents to learn about climate projections in the town and region, learn about our new volunteer program, officially launch it, and to talk about the impact of Fiona on the town and our tree canopy specifically. And this event was kind of like a healing space and learning space for the community. The second event, which you can see in the smaller photos, is the town's most recent CD Saturday event. As I said, just took place a few weeks ago, and both events really had fantastic turnout for our expectations, and we're really thrilled to be seeing a bunch of new faces showing up to get involved and learn more about this work. Looking ahead, we have several events planned for our spring. So we've been meeting with our core volunteer group. We had an initial training in February, and we've done a few brainstorming sessions, and those brainstorming sessions have led to this set of events. So tomorrow we have our first event as an EV test drive and ribbon cutting ceremony to honor / raise awareness of our newly installed level 2 dual port EV chargers. And then next week, we're doing a team cleanup as part of the Waste Reduction Week. Pictou County Solid Waste organizes a Go Clean Get Green initiative every year. So we'll be having a team event. And both of those lead up to our Earth Day tree planting event on April 22nd, where we'll be planting 200 seedlings near one of our community centers in response to the severe tree damage from Fiona in that area. Then later in the spring, we've got a clothing and gear swap planned for May 13th. Our volunteers will be participating in the upcoming Pictou County Climate Summit scheduled for June 3rd. And we've got a long list of brainstorming, including greening the streets for later in the summer. Thinking about how we can save some of the, or repurpose some of the fallen trees in our community into planter boxes and benches and other sorts of things that can make pedestrian walkways more green and hence attract and encourage active transportation. As well, one of our volunteers has officially developed a blog called Going Green at 70, and we've been publishing now bi-weekly posts filled with tips on how to reduce waste in the home with an emphasis on plastic waste. So as you can see, things are really starting to pick up for us and we're moving into the event stage. We'll continue to have our ongoing brainstorming and planning meetings. We also want to do a training with the group in June, and very importantly, a celebration dinner to acknowledge and appreciate all of the hard work being done by our volunteers. And in closing, I'd just like to recognize that the town of New Glasgow has benefited tremendously from participating in the Agents of Change program. Now we have an established program structure, recruitment strategy, as you can see here, some really beautiful branding. We are well positioned to mobilize our volunteers and accelerate climate action in our community. And as well, I'd like to thank you for the funding. It wouldn't have been possible without it. So yes, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And I can also throw my email in the chat in case you want to connect later.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emily. I just have a question in that I remember hearing you and Rachel speak about kind of the effects of Fiona and how it kind of forced a bit of a pivot for you folks. I wonder if you could elaborate on that just a little bit more and how it maybe shifted your plans and whether that's been a bit of a silver lining in the long run, and that has it brought more attention or has it really just slowed you down in what you originally wanted to do? I'm curious.
I would say a major way that it pivoted us is it definitely delayed our recruitment and launch period till later. We extended recruitment over a longer period of time with the decision to launch in the new year in January. But despite that seeming like a delay, Hurricane Fiona has really instilled a sense of, I guess, inspiration for action in our core volunteers. And it's a constant topic of conversation. Even just today, Rachel was telling me, someone asked her, have we recovered yet from that? I don't think so. So it's really on people's minds. And I would say it's kind of fueling the energy and momentum that we have now, because it's a constant reminder as you go through the community, looking at the fallen trees.
Mm-hmm. A question from Taylor, your fellow participant. Did the volunteers come up with the project and event ideas?
It's been a combination of both. We've created an idea proposal document, but then also just welcome ideas naturally in our brainstorming events. So some of them have been proposed by volunteers, and some of them myself and Rachel have proposed kind of as examples that align to some of the core focus areas of our action plan, and really presented it to the group and said, if this is something you're interested, we could go in this direction, or we can, brainstorm other directions. So we've tried to have a mix of the two.
Again, speaking to that agility, right? You need to be ready to be flexible and pivot. If the ideas aren't coming in, to come up with your own and then kind of react to both sides of that equation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. Please feel free to use that chat for questions or raise your hands. Before moving to the second part of today's session, where we're going to present the 3 resources, I just wanted to reflect a little bit from our perspective of running this program and kind of what we learned, I think it's clear what our key accomplishments were when you hear these stories. It's been incredible to see these programs develop. And we too kind of echo the sentiment that I think all three of our participants gave around agility in program design and targeting scope. When we first all started talking, I think you'll all remember that, the programs are going to be as wide as the sun itself and, talk about all things climate action. But then as we grew in that program development and program design phase, we really either focused in terms of focus area or thematic focus, so electrification of vehicles or home energy retrofits, or the target sector representatives. So we had other programs targeting small and medium businesses. And I think having that agility to design a volunteer program at either scale was really important, and something we learned was more important than we could have anticipated at the start. The other thing that I would just offer is that having the municipality involved in the establishment of the volunteer program, I think, was really important. It gave this kind of credential or credibility to the program and this long life. And Dave, I think you articulated it really well when you said it gave a path for the volunteers to help navigate the public administration system, which is not super well understood about how to get something done and where to turn to for these approvals or the timelines for those approvals. So having that connection directly into the municipality, I think, was really important. And one thing for all the folks on the line from municipalities that really could be your role is being that guide for how to get things done through the municipality and those introductions. So I think that's really an important piece. And the last one, which is very much our lesson learned, and I think a change to the way that we would design this, is a focus on outcomes rather than outputs. When we had put in our funding application, we had put in specific metrics around the amount of greenhouse gases that will be reduced through this program and the number of, very specific outputs of the project. And I think what's far more beneficial and will result in greater behavioral change are the outcomes of this project. The fact that the programs will continue and one cohort will become mentors for the next cohort of volunteers, and this kind of legacy of community climate action is far more important than the specific emission reductions of one discrete action by one group of volunteers. And I think we didn't anticipate that well enough, nor did we account for that our project had definitive timelines, right? When you sign a contribution agreement with the funder, you have to get the work done by a certain date. So to assume that we'd achieve some sort of significant GHG reduction output in that timeline was a little bit naive. And so I think learning that through you folks and understanding that piece has been really helpful and something that will continue in our future program design. So I think we have a Mentimeter planned now, which kind of picks up from the last question around if you were interested in doing a program, what would the focus of your climate volunteer program be? And I'd encourage those of you who already were part of Agents of Change to maybe reflect on this now, even after the fact, on how might that change. So again, just menti.com, and the code is 63537758. And we'll see how these shape up. And while we're answering that, I'll just reflect, there's a comment in the chat. In answer to this question, our participant is part of the Climate Action Commission. The commission was initiated by a municipal councillor and is endorsed by the municipality. It consists of 7 volunteer community members and 2 councillors. We're helping our municipality to develop their climate action plan as part of the PCP 5 milestone program. And there's a link to the PCP there. That's great. So it's sort of this volunteer municipal council collaborative to drive that action forward. Interesting to see nature-based solutions coming up. So boldly there in the yellow. You know, there's been a huge focus on this in the National Adaptation Strategy released by the federal government, as well as different funds that are coming out. Building retrofits and adaptation resilience closely following there. And I think we had one more question, right, Adlar? Which was, who would the target audience for a climate volunteer program be? We've heard from, you know, Kylie-Anne's program, very much targeted at youth with specific ages. We had another program from Wolfville targeted at businesses. So this is just an open text field. I think you should just be able to type in there, who would you want to focus a volunteer program at? Kylie-Anne, people are going to be reaching out to you, judging by that first answer that popped up. And there's been a comment that active transportation uptake would be another important area a volunteer program could make an impact, and that behavioral change required to have that modal split. So neighbor to neighbor volunteer programs, seniors, that 25 to 45 community, so young families, young homeowners, etc., and renters. Lots of great idea. Oh, I really like this one, environmental interest groups. So really harnessing those who already have an interest in environment and climate action. Large employers, so major employers within your community is another great one. Influencers, thinking about those who are champions or potentially have influence already within the community. These are great. We will make sure that these are also made available as part of the slides for today's presentation, and that I think there's some really great ideas here. So Adlar, I think I'm passing it over to you to walk us through some of the resources developed so that not only were we able to work directly with the 10 participating municipalities, we wanted to make sure that there were outputs of the project that could help others who weren't part of this cohort. So Adlar, over to you to discuss a couple of these.
Thanks, Eva. So I'll just take you through the 3 resources we developed. The first one is reflections on each of the programs that were developed by the cohort. So the purpose of this resource was to showcase the breadth of work and variety of the projects that were undertaken across the cohorts. And the resource shares stories and lessons learned about each volunteer program journey and provides a foundation for other interested municipalities to build off of and serve as an inspiration for starting up a similar type of volunteer program. So each reflection includes a brief description of the initiative, what their progress is to date, as well as helpful advice to other local governments looking to set up their own program. And the resource also features insightful quotes from the participants and images that capture some of the project development to date. The second resource we developed was a training and skills development guide, recognizing that training volunteers is a very large task. So we wanted to try and take out some of the guesswork for you on this. So this resource is intended to provide you with all the considerations for designing and running a volunteer training program. So it's intended to walk you through all of the steps needed to plan and run the event, and will help ensure that you haven't missed anything in your event planning. It addresses all the logistical considerations and offers key advice, guidance, strategies, and tips on how to run the training day itself. And some of the logistical considerations cover things ranging from like what type of room do you want to host this in to make sure that the volunteers feel comfortable in a good welcome environment. It goes on to facilitation guidance as well, and strategies and tips for how to actually engage in workshops and be a successful facilitator. The resource also includes checklists and materials that you would need to run the event, as well as insights from participating municipalities that ran their own training programs. In addition, it also includes a list of topics to include in your climate education sessions, as well as guidance on how to educate on the Indigenous perspectives on climate change and Indigenous knowledge. So I'll turn it over to you, Eva, for the last one there.
Perfect. And in case you haven't been following on, the links are on the slides, and I've just been popping them into the chat box if you want to go directly. So the last resource, and again, available in both French and English, don't be alarmed if the cover shot here is in French, it is in both languages, is a climate communications workshop in a box. So this is a zip file that you can download directly that has everything you need to develop and deliver a climate communications workshop locally. The idea is that that workshop and the delivery of it is meant to give insights and equip the participants in that workshop on how to better communicate about climate change, kind of the pitfalls of what to avoid. It has some elements around behavioral psychology in there, why people receive certain information a certain way, and the importance of using frames to target information. And some examples of successful communication strategies that we've seen over the years of doing this. So the zip file includes instructions and a facilitator guide for you as the facilitator or your colleagues, whomever you're asking to do this, or your volunteers themselves. It includes the slide deck that can be adapted or added to with local examples and local information and local knowledge. It includes breakout activity materials. There's two options for breakout activities, depending on how long you want your workshop to be. There's a shorter one that can be anywhere from sort of 25 to 40 minutes, and a longer one if you have more of a 2 or 3 hour session on climate communications, perhaps with your volunteers or with a committee locally. And then all the reporting forms and evaluation surveys that you might use to determine kind of the effects of that and to determine the knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing that were to happen. So all of those can be found on our website. If you don't remember the URLs, if you just Google Agents of Change, ICLEI, you'll get directly to the page and you'll get a direct link to all those publications. But we really want these to be useful. So as Adlar was just describing, as much as possible, we've included checklists and tips and tricks so that they're not just, 70 pages of narrative prose, but really something that you can download and mark off as you're designing different activities. On the resource that Adlar was just speaking about before, the training checklist, it's actually just a very useful checklist if you're designing any sort of event, to think through learning styles, to think through facilitation techniques, as well as logistics. How many chairs do you need? Do you have enough breaks? What are people's attention span? So we encourage you to use those publications. So before I close things out, I just want to leave one more round for questions for any of our participants or Adlar or myself. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to type into the chat box. Otherwise, that's the end of our formal presentation for today. I will say that today's recording, as well as PDF copies of slides and any links that we shared, will be made available on the Agents of Change website. So you'll be able to access that for any colleagues who may have wished to have joined or anybody that you would like to share this with. And if you'd like any other information, please feel free to get in touch. There's a question in here that I think all of us can tackle a little bit, was what is the premise of volunteers being the Agents of Change project? And I can speak a little bit about from our intent in designing it. We thought that municipal staff have a lot more ease in working through their own corporate climate targets and climate reduction work. There's ownership and operational control to reduce emissions within the corporation. But as municipalities move to advance emission reductions within the community, it becomes more challenging to affect change there and to achieve the emission reduction targets that they have set. So in designing this project, we thought that creating volunteer programs could be a way to create what we called agents of change within the community that could help with training from the municipality and with the backing of the municipality, bridge that gap and start extending to reduce emissions within the community and start being a champion for that work, being a voice that is maybe challenging for the municipal staff to be. I'll open it to any of our AOC participants who happen to be on the line, not just New Glasgow, Dufferin County, and Nanaimo, if you'd like to offer any thoughts on why a volunteer program. But of course, Kylie-Anne, Emily, Taylor, Dave, please feel free to also chime in on why you thought a volunteer program would be effective. Any thoughts on why? Maybe Kylie-Anne, I'll pick on you because you already had it in your plan even before our program. So we weren't convincing you. You were already thinking about this in the county.
We were, absolutely. So in our climate action plan, one of the sections in it is called Empowering Our Community. And we talk a little bit about this idea that you were saying, right? That we don't necessarily have control over all of the emissions in the community. And so it's a group effort to achieve our net zero goal in the county. So we absolutely agree, right? That being able to bring people on and making them those agents of change, and we've been calling them kind of like lifelong climate leaders, was something that was really important to us to do.
Thank you for that. There's another question here, and I think this is directed at the municipalities. How was managing the group of climate volunteers different or similar to managing any other social group in the community? Dave, I see you there.
Yeah, I can try and take this one on because just because my background prior to working as an environmental planner, I spent a couple of years at the city as well, working as a social planner, so working with very different stakeholders in that respect. I think I noticed a lot of similarities in terms of passion and interest. One thing I did see within our group, especially in our kickoff meeting, was just a really wide range of understanding on climate change and problems, and a lot of concern about climate change, but not necessarily a knowledge of how to act and what actions will be most effective, which they learned from us and from the group. So that was really when we didn't really talk a lot about who in terms of our target audience, but that was something we started out at the beginning of the program, is we wanted to talk to those folks that were concerned about climate change but didn't know how to act. And I think in some cases we got that, and in other cases we got who we thought we would get, which are some of those keeners and folks that are already doing a lot of these actions. But what I think we were able to do is have those keeners, take those other folks by the hand and kind of help them out a little bit as well. So.
Well, harness that keenness. Emily or Kylie-Anne, any reflections to that question of how this was different than managing any other kind of group that engages with the municipality? Okay, there is another comment, so a chance to reflect more. This person is suggesting that civic engagement is crucial for climate action. We need everyone engaged and contributing to solutions. Partnerships between community members and the municipality allow for community members to tap into municipal resources and structures, operational control, while the municipality can benefit from much needed human resources. At the same time, it allows for solutions to emerge that are designed by the community. I certainly did not say that better myself, but I think that really harnesses in on why this program was meant to kind of address the problem from both sides, from both the municipality and through that extension via the volunteers into the community. So thank you for that really thoughtful response into the chat. With that, and not seeing more questions in the chat, I would like to thank Dave and Taylor, Kylie-Anne and Emily, as well as all the other Agents of Change participants that are on the line, as well as our leadership group, for your really engaged and thoughtful participation over the course of the last 14 or 16 months or so. Of course, I'd like to thank everybody who is on the line today. And if you're all right with it, we will share a PDF copy of your PowerPoints along with the recording of today so others can access that. And then hopefully everybody